From the demolition of a large 3-kilometer viaduct in a busy residential neighborhood to the highest bridge ever demolished, in this video, we'll look at the most remarkable bridge demolitions and how they were done. Welcome to another episode of ZAD-M Facts. And now let's start with number 10, the Zhuan-yang Viaduct. China is well known for its lightning-fast infrastructure development. Despite the fact that the Zhuan-yang Viaduct in Wuhan was just 16 years old, it was already in need of replacement. The Zhuan-yang Viaduct, which stretches over 3.5 kilometers, is China's longest concrete bridge to be dismantled. The sheer length of the viaduct was not the only issue that proved difficult. Another issue complicating matters is that the Zhuan-yang Viaduct runs through a densely populated residential district in the city. Worse, important gas pipelines and power transmission wires ran parallel beneath the structure. To ensure that everything went as smoothly as possible, the engineers covered the viaduct's piers and then padded them with water-filled tanks. This was done to absorb the shock waves produced by the explosion and to limit the spread of dust. Everything proceeded as planned on the night of the demolition, with the 3.5-kilometer-long viaduct collapsing to the ground in spectacular fashion. Number 9. The I-90 Innerbelt Bridge. Cleveland, Ohio is the location of our second demolition in this video. The Innerbelt Bridge crossed the Cuyahoga River. However, it was discovered in 2009 that the aged bridge was under tremendous stress and was considered inadequate to carry the 8-lane traffic. The planned restoration of the Innerbelt Bridge was canceled after these structural flaws were discovered. Instead, it was now slated for demolition. So in July 2014, 180 pounds of explosives expertly planted on the bridge's foundations sent the entire structure crashing to the earth with the stroke of a button. Number 8. The Kosciuszko Bridge. The Kosciuszko Bridge was a truss bridge in New York City that over the Newtown Creek. It was only designed to accommodate roughly 10,000 automobiles at the time of its construction, which was pretty realistic given the number of vehicles in New York in the late 1930s. However, since being a part of the interstate highway system, the bridge has seen a daily average of roughly 180,000 vehicles. So, after over 8 decades of congestion and overloading, the state of New York decided in 2017 to ultimately demolish the bridge, which was beginning to show its age. During the demolition, approximately 900 explosives were detonated, bringing 10 million kilos of steel to the ground in front of a few hundred spectators. Number 7. The Henry Lawrence Bridge. The next demolition takes us to the state of Kentucky. The Henry Lawrence Memorial was built in 1932 and functioned as the state's lone bridge across the Cumberland River. In 2012, a cargo ship collided with the nearby Egner's Ferry Bridge, which was also built in the 1930s. The main pier collapsed as a result of the impact, nearly taking 4 vehicles with it. Following the incident, state officials expressed concern about the safety of the Henry Lawrence. 3 years later, the state of Kentucky declared the bridge obsolete and ordered its demolition in favor of a $128 million arch bridge. A sequence of explosions brought it down in spectacular way on April 11, 2018. As debris dropped into the Cumberland River, black smoke ascended from the site. Soon after, 2 cranes were employed to retrieve the steel and rubble that had fallen into the river to be used as scrap metal. Number 6. The Morandi Bridge. The Pont Morandi, built in 1967, was an integral bridge that connected Genoa's hilly coastline metropolis to the rest of Italy and adjacent France. It was 45 meters above the city and 1.1 kilometers long. During severe rains in 2018, a 210-meter piece of the bridge fell. The wires rusted and eventually snapped as a result of inadequate maintenance methods, bringing the deck and scores of vehicles going through with it. Unfortunately, 43 persons were killed in this catastrophe. Rescuers struggled to reach people buried beneath thousands of tons of concrete as the bridge fell beneath a residential area. The Morandi Bridge collapse in 2018 was the country's 12th bridge collapse since 2004, and locals were beginning to worry about the safety of their public roadways and highways. Since the disaster, the remaining segments of the Pont Morandi have stood as a vivid reminder of the horrific occurrence. In 2019, the Pont Morandi was scheduled to be demolished by a controlled implosion. To lessen the amount of dust in the air following the explosion, apartment buildings were evacuated and ground hydrants were opened. The icon of Genoa's grim past was reduced to rubble after a tremendous blast. The demolition was even dubbed symbolic by the regional president of Liguria, because it signified that this skyline that reminded us every day of the tragedy of August 14 will no longer be there, and that Genoa will now enter its future. Number 5. The Tappan Zee Bridge. Returning to the state of New York, the Tappan Zee Bridge was the state's longest bridge to be dismantled. It was about 5 kilometers long and crossed the Hudson at one of its widest points. Because of material shortages and cost-cutting measures, it was meant to endure only 50 years when it was built in 1950. By 2010, it had already passed this ostensible deadline, and plans to demolish it were in the works. The demolition was divided into 2 stages. First, the western structure was carefully lowered onto waiting barges before being sunk on the Atlantic coast of New York to serve as artificial reefs. Finally, on January 15, 2019, throngs of onlookers gathered by the Hudson to watch the famous bridge's dying moments. The eastern portion was blown up. Number 4. The Saskatoon Traffic Bridge. The following one takes us to Canada, to the city of Saskatoon. The Saskatoon Traffic Bridge was the city's oldest bridge, serving both automobile and pedestrian traffic for more than a century. They installed beautiful lights on the bridge in 2007, unwittingly alerting the city to the bridge's potential hazards. The lights would occasionally go out due to extreme shaking, prompting the city to look into its status further. After substantial corrosion was discovered along the structure, the traffic bridge was closed indefinitely. It was determined that the upkeep expenditures would be prohibitively expensive, and therefore demolition would be preferable. As a result, several pieces were manually removed with heavy equipment before the remaining 3 spans were blasted. Number 3. The Jamestown Bridge. The Jamestown Bridge, located in Rhode Island, was constructed in 1940 and spanned over 2 kilometers. It cost about $3 million at the time, which is equivalent to $64 million today. Because of its age and low capacity, the bridge had become outdated by 1992. Furthermore, the bigger and broader Jamestown Verrazano Bridge, which was built exactly next to it, had already opened. The ancient bridge remained closed for the next 14 years before the 335-meter-long center section was ultimately dismantled. The U.S. Coast Guard even described it as a navigation danger for ships going through the area. The remaining steel was subsequently collected by barges for recycling, while the remaining concrete was used to construct artificial reefs near the mouth of Narragansett Bay. Number 2. The U.S. 281 Bridge. The dismantling of the U.S. 281 Bridge in Texas provided a fresh use for scrap metal that is typically thrown in situations like this one. The bridge was built in 1936 and served as one of the primary crossings over the Colorado River. However, by the early 2000s, it had become too old and narrow for the increasing number of vehicles passing over it. By 2013, the state of Texas has chosen to demolish the bridge in order to save time on the building of a new replacement. During the countdown, a succession of explosives set on the supporting beams caused the entire structure to tumble down the Colorado in one fell swoop. However, the old bridge will not be totally removed. Over the next 3 days, they used cranes on top of boats to remove debris from the river. The scrap metal will subsequently be repurposed by a local recycling company into art sculptures for the city to display. Number 1. Rinsdorf Viaduct. Finally, for our number 1, consider the Rinsdorf Viaduct, the tallest bridge ever dismantled. The Rinstorf Viaduct in Wilnsdorf, Germany, was built in 1967 and stood 70 meters above the ground. The viaduct was scheduled to be replaced as part of a modernization initiative in the German state of North Rhine-Westphalia, where more than 60 bridges required urgent repairs or replacement. The rebuilt bridge, which was built exactly next to the existing one, has already been inaugurated by December 2021. The Rinstorf Viaduct's elevation and proximity to the new bridge posed a challenge for demolition. In February 2022, 120 kilograms of explosives were put on the pillar's middle and bottom parts. The middle charges were set off slightly before the bottom ones, keeping the viaduct's implosion within its own restricted footprint. The entire viaduct dropped to the ground exactly as anticipated, and the debris landed perfectly on a prepared bed on the ground. Hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe and hit the bell notification. Thank you for watching.